Good afternoon, Honorable Minister Lily D'Ambrosio, Sir Harvey Parbo, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Patrick, for that kind introduction. I'd also like to thank the Melbourne Mining Club for this invitation to come and speak to you today. It's quite an honor. Given today's subject, which is innovation through collaboration, I thought it was only appropriate that I open by imparting some wisdom gained over the years. And if you're crunched for time or run into somebody who's worked in the innovation field, the one thing you should never ever ask them is, so what's new? Seriously, it's an honor to be here today, and I want to talk about innovation. Creating something new, it isn't easy. Yet it is imperative for the future of our mining industry. We must find new ways to address the challenges that our industry faces if we are to survive and thrive in this 21st century. Since its founding in 2001, the Mining Club here has helped drive innovation by doing something that, frankly, our industry needs more of. It has brought us together to talk with each other. That is, as I hope I will make clear today, one of the key building blocks for innovation. See if I can get this working right. Oops, now we got it going. Just before I begin, I would like to point out that I'll be making some forward-looking statements, so I offer this cautionary statement. You can read it. I'll give you an hour. Let me open up by sharing some interesting and sobering data from MIT Technology Review. In 1958, companies in the S&P 500 could expect to remain there for about 61 years on average. Today, that average expectation is 18 years. The reason? Innovation, or the lack thereof. Simply put, innovative companies evolved, those that don't wither. The mining industry should take heed. We are going to go through one of the most challenging times in our industry in recent memory. In fact, the industry is enduring probably one of the most challenging periods that I can remember, and that spans over 4 decades. And I can't believe it's been actually that long, because I feel like I just kind of started. So it's happened in a heartbeat. The sustainability of our industry is at risk if the current trends continue. And I'll summarize those, such as declining productivity, brought on by our declining resource quality and the legacy of what I would consider to be some inefficient capital allocation. When you look at high energy consumption as an industry, we also have high elevated costs, everything from input costs, so that royalties, operating costs, permitting costs, and other costs. We also have increasing concerns from multiple stakeholders, which ultimately drives our project cost upwards. And the ultimate trend, which is our volatile commodity prices, if in fact we can call that a trend at all. Without delving too deeply into the past, let me give some quick synopsis of where we're at and how we got there. The price of gold, many of you no doubt fondly remember, rose for about 12 years straight to kick off our new millennium. Other commodities like copper, iron, aluminum also enjoyed big multiple-year runs. Most miners Barrick included, pursued production above all. The good times never seemed to come to an end. Well, and they did. If I can get this to work. There we go. Gold is down about 40% since 2012, but our costs aren't. In fact, the operating costs across the industry continued to rise even after the price of gold and base metals plummeted. And finding new deposits isn't getting any easier. Ore grades are declining, and new discoveries are deeper in the ground and increasingly more complex. The industry is also mining in more remote areas where water is scarce and infrastructure is minimal. And there are more challenges I want to mention. With the water and infrastructure, the mining industry is also challenged to be looking at increasingly smaller environmental footprints. Our energy costs, with comminution energy reduction and increased transportation of ore and/or our mining products, and increasingly we're now looking at real-time data to manage our mining activities. These are some of the challenges that Barrick faces, along with many of the peers across the industry. These challenges are overshadowed for a time by the super cycle, and they were also overlooked. Well, the industry can't overlook them anymore, and you can only cut costs so much. Ultimately, mining companies must mine, and they have to do it more efficiently, more cost-effectively, and more creatively, and innovation is a key part of that effort. Which raises the question, how do you drive innovation? Is there a secret formula or elixir? Let me share an anecdote that dates back to my Placer Dome days when I was back in 1995. I was at this Porgera mine in Papua New Guinea and commissioned an expansion project. The mine used large volumes of lime for processing, and they were having a hell of a time producing enough. So we worked with the site personnel and a kiln manufacturer, and I think it was in Perth, as I recall, to build a new type of kiln to produce more slake lime for what we called the 4B expansion. The idea was for the new kiln was to salvage the finer lime particles that were rejected by the main processing kilns, the -1/2 inch to +1/2 inch. We did some experiments, we bought the new type of kiln, we commissioned it, and it worked really well. We now have much better lime recovery, and virtually all the lime slimes are rejected. That's about the only thing, we use everything else. So it's working well. Now fast forward 19 years to 2014, at which I was with Barrick. Can get that to work. There we go. Shortly after joining the company, I was here at the Pueblo Viejo mine in the Dominican Republic. It turns out they had concerns about lime shortages. At PV, and you can see it from this picture, we have 3 kilns, all of the same design, and you can see that in the picture. So I said we should send our process metallurgist to Porgera, which Barrick had acquired back in 2006. We should have employed the Porgera kiln technology at PV when we designed it. Long story short, Barrick is now looking at transferring the kiln technology to Pueblo Viejo that we learned at Porgera. And I'm not sharing this story to show how long I've been around in mining, which is obviously quite a while. I want to show it because it underscores a few points on how I see innovation. Number 1, innovation is critical to the long-term success of any mining company. If we didn't build that new kiln at Porgera, we'd have had a lime shortage and been forced to curb production or to purchase lime off-site at a much higher cost. Number 2, innovation requires collaboration and trust. At Porgera, the operations had to work with a project team in Vancouver to understand the lime problem and to work out what various options were, and also with the lime manufacturer to design a special type of kiln. We then had to work with others, both inside and outside the company, to implement a solution. Without that collaboration, the project would not have succeeded. Our current mine manager at Porgera, Greg Walker, is one of those guys who went with me to PV last year, and when he saw the problem, he said, "Hey, come and see what we do at Porgera. This is a simple solution." While it may seem straightforward, anyone who's worked in the business for more than 2 minutes knows that trust and collaboration is sometimes harder to find than the gold we look for. People often conceal problems for fear of being blamed, or they try to solve every challenge themselves, no matter how complex. Sometimes they're not open to change, or they don't realize that there's an issue because what they're doing still works, even though there may be a better way to do it. So building a corporate culture that promotes trust, that doesn't punish anyone for seeking help or suggesting new ideas, a culture that, in short, encourages collaboration as a precondition for innovation. I call it bootlegging on each other's success, if we want to coin another mining phrase. And number 3, new ideas should be shared broadly across the company. And there is opportunity sometimes to actually spread it across the industry. And you could compare that with the computer industry, where ideas seem to just migrate very quickly laterally across the industry, and in short time at all, everybody's kind of up to speed. That's not necessarily a tall order for a junior mining company when we have about 1 or 2 mines, even though if you don't encourage the open communication, you'd be surprised how fast, even in a small company, how silos can build up. For us senior miners with operations on different continents, sharing ideas is more of a logistical challenge. But the basic idea is the same. We need to talk to each other and find out what each other is doing on various issues. One of the more important things I tried to do during my time at Barrick is to make sure that our operators get that chance. We made a concerted effort to expose our mine managers to other Barrick operations so they can share ideas with their other GMs and see firsthand what their peers were doing. Earlier this year, for example, 3 of our North American-based mine general managers visited Veladero mine in Argentina with me. During that visit, Andy Cole, our general manager at Goldstrike, observed that some of the maintenance practices at Goldstrike might be very helpful at Veladero and the Lagunas Nortes mines. Now, we've had senior guys from Veladero scheduled to come up and spend some time at Goldstrike to learn more and see how those processes can be adapted. And regarding Lagunas Norte in Peru, we've already had their mining teams and processing teams visited Goldstrike to learn about those maintenance practices and to learn how to operate autoclaves, because that's going to be our next step at Lagunas Norte. Is a challenge, eh? So the answer to the question I posed earlier is there is no magic formulae. It all comes down to collaboration. If you got a problem, and even if you don't, you should always be talking to a whole bunch of people in the industry who have different experiences. That's how idea generation starts. And let me be clear on something, that innovation doesn't require the so-called eureka moment. An innovative idea doesn't need to be new to the world, it only needs to be new to the operation that requires it or it can apply it. In fact, innovation doesn't involve technology at all sometimes. It might involve new methods or processes, like Valadero example. And if Barrick can adapt maintenance practices for an operation that are leading edge and to make one of the other operations better, then as far as I'm concerned, that's part of the innovation. Which leads me to another point. At Barrick, innovation is about developing new practical solutions to complex operational and business challenges. Mining has got plenty of those, as I've discussed from the outset. At Barrick, R&D spend is pinpointed at addressing those issues. Figuring out how to reduce capital and energy intensity, the latter of which I will talk about shortly, are some of the bigger questions our company is trying to answer. To find those answers, collaboration and communication are key, as I hope I've made clear, but you also need expertise. That's where Barrick's Strategic Technology Solutions team comes in. The STS group, as we call it, consists of a team of experts in all the key areas of mining, like energy, mineral processing, flotation, environmental sciences, and mining itself. Their mission, and they always have to choose to accept it, is to develop solutions for the company's most intractable problems. Since its creation in 2005, the group has played an integral role in the development of patented flotation technology, developed a new mercury containment system at Goldstrike, and played a key role in a first-of-its-kind leaching facility at Goldstrike. The STS group is also exploring new ways to reduce Barrick's energy spend, which is still the company's biggest cost despite the lower oil price. In fact, Barrick has initiated a company-wide program to find ways to reduce its energy intensity, which is just a fancy way of saying to reduce our energy spend and use energy more efficiently. Barrick is looking at everything from powering haul trucks with liquid natural gas to expanding renewable energy usage to changing the way it transports rock. On that latter point, one thing the company is exploring is the use of railvaders to move ore from the pit or underground to processing. This is a far more energy efficient and cost-effective method of transportation than haul trucks themselves, and could generate tremendous savings and productivity gains. Barrick has also introduced a new energy reporting tool that provides timely data in a range of metrics in energy, like energy used by mine, and pinpointing which processes consume the most energy. By collecting and sharing this data, the company will be able to glean trends quickly and to implement changes that make sense. The STS group is intimately involved in all of these. When a project team is created to address a technological challenge, an STS member is always on that team. When general managers visit other Barrick mines to discuss technology or meet outside technologies experts, an STS group team member is always there. In short, the company has developed a systematic and collaborative approach to innovation. We eliminate the silos and have little or any bureaucracy in this area. It is a good example of a kind of partnership culture that Barrick is trying to build. Information and ideas must be more quickly passed across the organization and also adapted and implemented. We have to counteract what I call the not invented here syndrome. One of the more notable recent accomplishments at Barrick that encapsulates everything I've been talking about is the thiol sulfate project at Goldstrike. This massive project, also known as TCM, or Total Carbonaceous Materials Project, involved the construction of a new leaching circuit that uses thiol sulfate instead of cyanide to recover gold from the ore. Cyanide had always been used at Goldstrike to recover gold, but it couldn't leach the gold from the double refractory ore that we were mining at the time, and we wanted to start processing. The ultrafine carbonaceous materials in the ore kept stealing all the gold. Without a solution, Goldstrike would have had to close its site autoclaves, lay off hundreds of people, and process those ounces years down the road using the site's roaster. The company was aware of the problem long before Goldstrike began mining the carbonaceous ore. And that raises another important point. Innovation usually takes time. So if you know you have a problem, don't wait. Start thinking, planning, collaborating, and taking action as soon as possible. The SDS group began lab tests back in the mid-2000s to determine whether or not the thiol sulfate leaching process was a viable operation. It was widely known that thiol sulfate could recover gold from carbonaceous ore, but it's also a very difficult chemical to master. Lab tests were promising, so Goldstrike built a demo plant to process the ore in the real world. This demonstration plant operated for about 16 months and was followed by the construction of a full-scale thiol sulfate leaching circuit. It was a total team effort that involved thousands of people, both internal and external to Barrick. They've even built the thiol sulfate chemical production plant at Goldstrike to ensure that we have a ready supply. The success of the project highlights the advances that are possible when mining experts work hand in hand with the operations to tackle complex challenges. It was a groundbreaking project, and Barrick is looking to see where else we can use to apply this patented technology on other operations. Or another option is to license the technology to our peers, which can only help the industry overall. Helping the industry to become most innovative is absolutely imperative. We have seen some impressive pockets of innovation in mining during the past decade, like our TCM project. But the fact of the matter, it has been far too long since a significant technological advance or step change has permeated across our industry. And there's really no good reason for this. In fact, we're kind of fortunate in mining because unlike, say, Apple or Samsung, or I look at Queensland and New South Wales, we're not direct competitors for the most part. Maybe I should use different states for the competition given this weekend coming up. That leaves some wiggle room to collaborate across the broader industry itself. Over the years, I've been involved with Cominco's Technical Research Center in Trail, which is now TEC, the Technology Research Center in Placer Dome in Vancouver, which is now owned by Barrick and called OTEC. I've also worked with several innovation organizations like Elmira and CEC here in Australia, as well as Camero, Merarco, and CMIC back in Canada. I hope to continue working closely with these organizations to support the innovation even as I enter retirement. It can be scary to change and try new things, but it also can be fun and rewarding. At the end of the day, if you make the changes to reduce your environmental footprint, lower your cost, improve your productivity, extend the mine lives, you've made a positive impact on your business. So I leave you with this question. What are you doing to encourage innovation? For example, in areas like exploration and geophysical technologies, or mine tunneling and continuous mining technologies, processing technologies or processing equipment which is more efficient and more effective, like stirred mills to improved energy usage, or column and flash flotation, or more than just large tank cells, or new processes like TCM to improve recoveries of our commodities. It can be as simple as encouraging your people to think of new, better, and different ways of doing things. It can be facilitating knowledge sharing or providing official or unofficial mentorships. It can be working in an organization, industry organization, to help advance new ideas, like Elmira. Great ideas grow in receptive, collaborative environments, and they don't have to be on the scale of a TCM project. In fact, scale is less important than the desire to nurture change. Discourage silos and encourage your people to speak up and share ideas. Don't let phrases like, "That's not the way we do things around here," gain currency in your organization. They are the death knell to innovation, and our industry can ill afford whether to have those any longer. On that, I'd like to thank the Melbourne Mining Club again for inviting me to speak today on a very important topic which I feel very passionate about. And I thank you all for listening. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Jim. Now, members and guests, if you could put your thinking caps on and come up with some questions. But before we get to questions, Ian, we've got Ian Howarth out here and Richard Shoddy. Someone has to catch a flight to Tokyo this afternoon to attend the Australia-Japan Joint Business Dialogue to promote Victorian industry and strengthen trade links. So, Minister D'Ambrosio, we don't want you to miss that flight. It's important to Victoria. Members and guests, please join me in thanking the Minister for joining us today, and note that the IMARC team will be out front after the lunch, but right now they're seconded on table 28. Minister, have a pleasant flight, and I hope you do make it. It's tight timing. Thank you. Okay, great. Who's got the first question? It's over here. Thank you. If we could give standing name and affiliation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Alan Trench, here as a guest of Elmira, supporting the West Coast Eagles. My question, Jim, thank you for a great talk. I was fortunate enough to work for Barrick in the early 2000s, and there was a programmer there at the time called the Barrick Operating System, which was attempting to do some of the things that you've spoken to. I was just wondering if the Barrick Operating System still exists in any way, shape or form, or whether it's morphed into something, or whether it was resigned to history, Jim.
I would say it's morphed into. We still have the Barrick operating systems, throughout some of our operations in particular, but in other operations it's morphed into other operating systems. But they're all designed to try to push the improvements in each organization or each operation we have. So some operations call it the Barrick operating system, and others call it their own management operating system. But we have it and we've been continuing to push and improve on those systems throughout the organization.
There's a question to your right, standing up now.
Thanks, Richard. Peter McCarthy from AMC. Toward the end of the talk, you mentioned innovation in exploration, and the company Barrick has had considerable success in recent times with the Red Hill Gold Rush project in Nevada, more than 15 million ounces, and more recently Alturas in Chile. What part did innovation play in those exploration successes?
Alturas I'm probably more familiar with because I got involved with Alturas as I came into the organization. And I would argue that the knowledge, the technical knowledge and innovation we used for seeking out that type of deposit, it's a very, because I would argue Pascua-Lama, Valadero, Alturas are all of the same geological type systems, and developing that knowledge and being able to quickly take that knowledge and some of the innovation they did in terms of determining those type of ore bodies and going other places and finding Alturas as an example was, I think, very much part of that system. I look at our exploration team in South America in particular, and they're incredibly systematic in their approach to trying new ideas and looking for the ore bodies. And I'm sure you'll see what happens with Alturas in a couple of years. It's a very exciting ore body.
Okay. Now, before we take this question, Ian Howarth. Ian, could you slip around the back there? There's a question up there with Gary Morgan. But we'll take this question from here first. Thank you.
Hi, my name's David. I'm a student at RMIT here in Melbourne and hopefully a future leader in industry. Just have a question about your thiosulfate process. I'm just wondering how this compares to the current process and if it's easily retrofittable to sort of existing plants, or whether it's sort of a very focused technology, as in you have to custom design a plant.
We actually retrofitted the existing autoclave plant at Gold. So we added on the different thiosulfate leaching process, but we employed the autoclaves that we already had there and then just converted that section of the process. So in that respect, it saved us quite a bit of money to be able to do that. And it allowed us, by doing that and using existing facilities, we're able to pull a huge stockpile of untreatable ore to bring that forward. And that's basically what drove the economics of the project, is to be able to retrofit an existing system and process the ore sooner. So it was all driven by the NPV of the gold recovered.
That corner, is that Michelle, I think? Or Portia?
Michelle Levine, Hayoma Mining, a small mining company with big aspirations. Thank you for your presentation. The idea of collaboration and communication is fantastic. I'd really like your view on competition. I'm sure the Americans and Russians didn't collaborate when they were on their way to the moon. And our experience as a small miner, actually talking to Barrick, has been one where our feeling was that there was an enormous amount of knowledge, expertise that would have been very helpful for us to have a collaborative discussion, but very closed. So it's not always as simple as being collaborative and keeping the communication flowing. I'd like your view on competition.
I think that is true. I mean, we were talking about this morning, and I think the real competition in the mining is actually finding the ore body. That different processes, technologies, and mining methods is basically not part of the competition. But I know even in a company like Barrick, you're starting to see where our exploration guys are starting to get involved in collaborative research, both in Canada and also in here for methodologies. Obviously, there's always going to be some technologies and approaches where if the company feels that they have a competitive advantage, they're going to be reluctant to give that up. And I think that's a reality in every industry. We're going to always find that's the case. So it's always striking that balance. Not sure if that answers your question, but
I think we've got two more questions, one from here and one from up the back, please.
Hello, Serena Lillywhite from Oxfam, and I'm delighted to be here as the guest of MMG. I'm interested in your thoughts on how to apply innovation to the complex and challenging social and community issues that the industry can face, resettlement, for example, and perhaps you've got some examples of how Barrick's been able to do that. Thank you.
That's a good question, and I think that's I think when you look forward, certainly going forward in the mining industry, I think that's going to be a continual challenge. That gets back what I say, the expectations of the multiple stakeholders. And I've lived in Indonesia and I've lived in Africa, and it's always a constant challenge. It's how do you continue to develop the industry, but trying to minimize the impact of the industry on the country or the communities. And I think it's always going to be a question of continual dialogue. And I go back and look at my most recent example in Africa. My wife and I actually just moved back to Canada from Botswana, and Botswana is an interesting example where when you have collaboration and connectedness between the governments and communities and the mining industry, you can have great success. So even though it's a country about the size of France, population very small, very, very ultra poor when it started, but it had innovative leaders at the time when it formed as a country who felt that they had to work together with the mining industry, and in this case it was the diamond industry, to help develop the country and the community. And they were successful in doing that. Botswana now is the only middle-class country effectively in Africa. The revenues from the diamond mines that were developed in collaboration with the government, and I operated a company that was basically owned 50% by the government. And they managed to keep that collaborative, and you had to do a lot of communication with the community and continued to work through that. But in the end of the day, if you did that, you would have success. And I look at the education system in the country and the young people that I had working for me. We ultimately only had, I think it was 3.7% expats in that company, and the rest was trained in. And I would argue that some of the engineers that I had who were Botswana were arguably as good as anything I've ever worked with across the world. So I think that's a classic success, and in Barrick, I think we have some successes as well. We also have some challenges, continual challenges, and I've been involved in some of those challenges. But I think it's going to be something you just have to keep the communication open. It has to be, and you have to be available to listening on both sides to coexist, and continue a commitment.
One last question, Jim, from that corner here.
Good afternoon, Ian Keys, Morgan Stanley, as a guest of Shine Wing. A lot of the discussion is focused around the supply side and processing. What about the ultimate innovation versus regression with gold versus money on the demand side? Obviously, we've seen potential for a Federal Reserve rate rise coming. Have you found any new friends?
I'm not sure if I can answer that question. We were talking at the break, and I said I've been involved in 3 times in the gold industry, one in the 70s and one in the 90s, and then most recently. And in each one of those times, I've actually gone into the trough in terms of the gold price. And just when you think you have everything figured out and you know what's driving gold price, or is it a commodity or is it a currency, you get kind of fooled. And I think right now, when you look at our gold price now, it doesn't seem to be particularly responsive to anything. And so I'm not too sure. If I knew the answer to that question truly, I wouldn't be standing talking to you. I'd be on my computer doing investments.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. I think we're right there, Richard, for the questions. Thank you. Jim and I were having a chat before we came up here today. Just pop there, Jim. And he said, so what am I going to get asked? And I said, well, it's going to be the gold price. And I had to remind him of Sir Harvey's famous response to that question on the gold price. He said, I can predict it'll go up or it'll go down, and I can predict that if I make a prediction, it will be wrong. So it goes well. Members and guests, I'd like to introduce Lorraine Meldrum, the CEO of Swan Global, to the stage to propose the vote of thanks. Lorraine.
Listening to Jim, watching what interests him, assessing his achievements, one can say there is so much to absorb. He's not just about producing more ounces, he's more about more ounces at lower costs, and in large part by getting people working better together. He knows that high performance occurs when people trust each other, work well together, challenge each other, and work together to overcome challenges. Studying Jim and his attributes will tell us a lot. He has been credited with having both trained and mentored Barrick's mine managers, as well as preparing them to take on more responsibility and accountability. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Jim Gowans, and thank you, Kathleen, for coming along with Jim to support him. Welcome to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Thanks, Jim.